want to talk about words. Words in today's linguistic zeitgeist. Words have been either weaponized, lost their meaning to too frequently used, rendering them completely impotent, or have become so polemic and so controversial that one has his own mouth twisted either one direction or another.
Mm.
And things can either be, the unfortunate thing is that it's either or. So it's or this or that. And in that way it perpetuates kind of warring factions and perpetuates further division.
Yeah, I think words in today's day and age has become a major trigger. If you want to get somebody's blood pressure rising, there's certain words that will really get them going.
Yeah, I was recently having this conversation with myself regarding the use for potential.
Analyze that.
Right.
You talked back.
I did talk
In
back.
your own voice?
In my own voice.
Okay, very good. Check, cleared that.
Very good. Yeah, I was weighing whether or not it's appropriate or safe or however you want to call it. The word schizoid. And again, there's the version of it where it's a derogatory term, kind of aimed at people with schizophrenia, but it's sort of unfairly hijacked, right? Because there is a word schizoid that's got its own life, but it's been kidnapped and abducted and somewhere locked up in the basement of derogatory terminologies. And the etymology of it is from Greek, which sort of means separate and kind of disjointed and disconnected and
right.
So
which goes into some of the early theories of schizophrenia, where the mind just becomes fragmented into a million different pieces and so disorganized the individual doesn't even know what's coming from where.
Yeah, no consistency, right? And that sort of fragmented, chaotic element of it, and so I had that sort of conversation with myself because it was I don't recall anymore what the actual context of it was going to be, but it was intended to mean what the word means. It was intended to suggest a fragmented inconsistency of something. Right. And by no means, in my mind, it was tied to a schizophrenia or a derogatory kind of connotation towards people with mental disorder. But the very fact that I sort of ended up having this conversation with myself is indicative of something. This imposed or need for self-censorship, which isn't to say one shouldn't, right? We just don't shoot off out of off the mouth whatever you want, but there's a balance, and it was kind of an interesting thought experiment to sort of look at it, and I would like to use the word. I like the word for whatever reason, right? And so
it rolls off the tongue nicely, right?
Yeah, and so do you then?
But it has a significant meaning behind it when used properly,
right? Yeah, because
it's been well thought out. It's not just something that they randomly put together and said, let's name it this. No.
Yeah, and it's that whether how to present it in a way, and we automatically do this. We think of words and we think of way that we express ourselves and pump our thoughts out into the universe trying to avoid unnecessarily or accidentally hurting people.
Right, that's the heart of everything, right? Like compassion, having understanding, and trying not to unnecessarily use words with the intention of harming another individual, right?
Unless the intention is to hurt somebody, and then in that case, the use of the word is appropriate, right? If the word you're using is meant to inflict pain, then
if that's your goal,
right? That's your goal. Then that's the thing. But this is not what I'm
you see that all the time when you're driving with those people that cut you off.
Right.
And you just got to observe it. There's a lot of words being thrown out there that have really serious intention to hurt another person.
Yeah. So in this dialogue of mine or monologue, whichever one crosses me off a.
It goes back and forth.
Dialogue,
monologue. It waxes and wanes.
Yeah.
It's like the tide.
And the thought then was, well, it's not. There's a balance to be had, and one can present a definition of sort of to clarify the terms. Right? Like, this is what I mean by this word, and it's a thoughtful thing to do, because some people might not know what the word means, and so you could define on the fly, and the person's like, oh, I learned a new word today also. I'm trying to learn new words as much as I can, and sometimes you can't, put your hand on, excuse me, I don't know what that word meant, but if you could kind of glean the meaning from the content. But this idea of either or, the or as an in-between word, that the words can be so powerful or so nothing. And in thinking of that, what I've arrived at is that the or has to be changed. Because it's not, so long as that or seems to kind of dangle between those two things, it does create a warring state. It's this versus that, this one against that. And
tell me about it. Sit 5 minutes with me in a couples therapy session, and you'll see a warring state of words.
Right.
You'll see how words can really induce a war between two people.
Yeah. And so, and that's, within the Zen philosophy, the idea of, and it's not only within Zen philosophy, but this idea of worlds perfuming other worlds, the multiverse almost, that is present here in front of us, and the vast multitude of realities intertwined with one another, which makes it not or, but and. So the words are so powerful, and at the same time, nothing. And
superimposed one on top of the other,
right.
Interwoven.
Yeah, they simultaneously. It's a very bizarre, and I think psychologically, kind of, the mind has to Houdini think a little bit, because we are accustomed to a finite arrival at a destination. Psychologically, emotionally, like, okay, I'm here. I cannot be here and there simultaneously. We're the whole of philosophy and the paradigm of life is based in the physical form. And so I can sit in this chair or that chair. I can't sit in both of these chairs.
Right.
So the end doesn't even arise in the mind. But we have to understand that the mind is not the body in this context. And that it could be both. And words can both simultaneously both exist in these two different realities, and one being that they are nothing, and the other being that they are so powerful. Because the word pain Pain, 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 pain. Are you in pain?
Stop.
Right? So hot doesn't burn. And pain
for some people,
hurt.
if I say baldy, ouch.
Yes.
Right? If that's something that you're self-conscious about, then now I feel pain.
Right. But the word itself is not inflicted the pain.
That's the thing. The word itself, bald,
right,
does not refer to pain.
Yeah.
So it's almost like we transform the word into that pain.
We have that ultimate great superpower. We are sort of godlike in that sense.
And it almost follows in philosophy where words also have a beginning, duration, and an end. Mm-hmm. So there's the evolution of the word, right? So when the word is created in the furnace deep in the earth, I think the word God's name is Webster. The Webster God, when he created the word, by the way, I'm dating myself. Everyone out there who's from my generation surely has seen Webster's dictionary. It was heavy enough to kill somebody.
Yes.
Very
there was one of them in a classroom, and if you wanted to know the word, the good teacher would say, well, go look it up.
Go look that up.
And the pain of having to look it up
painful.
Makes you remember it, though.
You don't forget that.
Right, because you're like, I'm not walking over there and rifling through 3,000 pages again, so I better hold on to that.
Better remember that. I'm not doing that twice. Yeah, so the word transforms and evolves. The individuals, throughout their lifetime, can change the meaning of the word based on their experiences, or I think the collective, too. I mean, there's two different things. I think early on when you first started talking, you were referring to the collective whole and how they're responding to certain types of words that can trigger people. But yeah, I think that the individual wields a lot of power, and when there's a communication between two people, the sounds are traveling back and forth, right? But what we can't see, like you're talking about, is what's hidden, right? What is the world that is overlapped right here in this present moment? On a very basic level, our thoughts and our feelings, we can't see that. I can tell you something. I can say, hey, where the heck did you get those sandals from? Those are really ugly. And then you can make a face, right? And then I can say to myself, I think that didn't have a good impact, right? But in the inside, we don't see that part. And then here's another thing that creates a faux pas during communication. I just want you to understand what I mean, right?
Right.
That's...
And this is where words fall short. And Rumi's got a splendid little bit on one of his poems, and he talks largely of love, but it's the love of the divine for the most part, kind of cloaked in the mundane, but something to the effect of, and the pen breaks and the paper kind of wafts away in the wind, and what he's hinting at is the end of the power of language to communicate. We contort ourselves so much to try to express our inner worlds, and we have to acknowledge that duality, the end. That words cannot really express. And that's all we got, in a sense. I mean, actions speak louder than words, and pictures are, worth 1,000 words and all of those things. But it's the primary mode of, at least on the conscious level, communication. Because pheromones are more subtle and more first of a communication, right? Very subtle. Somebody walks in the door, and before we even kind of say a word, there it is. There's a whole communication, underway already.
And even body language, too. We're processing that too.
Yeah, and so
before we even talk,
we could say all those things are language and words, and it shows body language. Right? But in terms of the use of the Mr. Webster, this episode is sponsored not, but could be. it really is this.
Put that in a book bag and take a hike. You'll see how strong your legs get after a few months.
Right.
I tell you, that's the ultimate rock weight right there.
Yeah, and it's the refinement of oneself that aims and hopes for being able to communicate and transmit our deepest, innermost feelings and emotions. And try as we may, language can't. And
fall for it, right?
And
I think,
time,
what's his name? Rumi refers a lot to that, right? Like you were referring to.
Right, the shortcomings.
Isn't there, I don't remember exactly, maybe remember where he says something like, I think this one was talking about love, and he's talking about there's a field in the beyond.
Beyond good, right? Beyond right thinking,
tries to be right,
beyond wrong thinking, there's a metal element.
Wow, that's
I say that just the other day, I had someone come for the tea with the abbot.
Yes.
So it's a kind of a private,
wonderful program, by the way.
Yeah,
for those of you who are interested.
It is. We have tea and talk. And someone was asking. People don't know what to do with it. So.
Sometimes with words, sometimes with mind.
Right. And someone was asking, well, what's the protocol? And I said, well, the protocol is that.
Communicate.
It's in the Rumi-like, Rumi-esque in a sense. It's let's have tea, like two human beings, and what comes of it if we don't try to manufacture. And I've spoken about this recently in one of my talks. Someone had asked, because technically, if there are no questions in the Zen, culture, the Zen master doesn't speak. Yes. And I saw a meme that said, a great wise man once said nothing. So there is this invitation that I most of the time give. Are there any questions? And someone said, I don't have a questions, but I'm going to come up with one, and that turned into a whole thing, because the manufactured questions in this context of Zen and the pursuit in the way that Zen presents pursuit of truth, of self-knowledge, of wisdom, or enlightenment, ultimately speaking, the manufactured questions are false. They're plastic. Mm-hmm. They're not truth. Mm-hmm. The way that if someone comes into the Zen center and says, oh, I see that you have the abbot's room, and I see they have Dr. Lambert's office and bathrooms. And if this is where their recount of where they have been and what they have seen ends, then right away we know, okay, well, they haven't seen the Dharma hall. And it's through the journey. So for people who do the work, in the questions lies also not only a question but an announcement of where I've been, how much work I've done, what have I seen, and they question then those new vistas that they visit. So someone could say, oh, there's a Dharma hall. And then someone else will say, well, have you been to the kitchen? Oh, there's a kitchen. I haven't been to the kitchen. Why? Because they haven't done the work. So they haven't seen the kitchen. And on and on. It's like, oh, there's a cafe. Yes. Did you see the lunchroom? No. Okay. So yeah. Mm-hmm. And so in the questions we know exactly where the student
their understanding.
Yeah. What they've seen, where they've been, what their upcoming questions may be.
I think maybe the next time that you meet, and if you have a conversation, and then they reflect back to their understanding, then well, after the question, how much did they dig? How much did they retain? Right? Like you were saying, if they came and they spoke to you, and then they went to their friends and regurgitated and said, oh, I just saw the abbot's room and I saw Dr. Lambert's office, then how much did you miss? Right? Or how much did you not take with you and process and digest? That?
And so words, again,
yes,
are very powerful because they are They are the map, but but they are not the territory in the Zen context. So this idea of words being nothing and being so powerful really kind of recently captured my thinking, because it leaves us, as Zen frequently does, broader than verses. Verses, even in the verses, the usual is my position versus your position, right? And the usual is I know ever so much more about my position and not enough about your position, because if you read maybe I don't know Miyamoto Musashi's and the Book of Five Rings, and know thy enemy better than your friend kind of thing, then maybe you're a skilled warrior in a sense. But for the most part,
people don't do that.
People don't do that. They it's confirmation bias, so they reinforce their already pre-existing notions and points of views, and so the verses keeps us ensconced in our own little corner, and it's a sort of isolationist state of being, that and then it's also the verses pairs it with usually a sheer refusal to hear the other side, because the emotion becomes involved, and forget it. Don't talk about religion or politics, because so divisive. To me, they're one and the same. Religion and politics. Politics is religion of the people, and religiously adhered to and violent in that sense, and
The comment right there is that the mind shuts down and closes when you have a discussion with a person that has a point of view outside of your perspective or outside of the limitations of your knowledge. There's what you're trying to say is, when it's versus, nobody wants to see the other person, the other side. They just stand their ground and they die there. The ego death. You just die there. I'm not moving from this spot, right?
And if we consider the yin yang, or what we in Korean call umyang symbol of this sort of black and white fish, if you will, with that so the black fish is the white eye and the white fish is the black eye kind of thing. And nothing in this life is entirely comprised of a position to which it is completely endeared to. There's always within it an element of that which one considers opposition. So that the black half of the fish has the white eye. If it does not, that is stagnation. Stagnation is death.
Yes.
And no element of life has 100% of one kind of element of it.
Can the person open their mind enough to include that one little piece?
And this is where the end between these things comes in. Right? Because
that's a very powerful connotation there that's created, right? That end is freeing.
It's inclusive. It's opening. It's broadening. It's freeing. Because in as much as a person considers their mired position to be so rigid, it is still, and in fact, unbeknownst to them frequently, a prison.
It is.
There's an encampment that they believe that they want to be in entirely, but if a thing brings you so much pain and so much suffering and so much friction, is it really what you want on a deep thing? Or is it kind of this cult-like thing? Well, I've sold my car and I've moved into the mountains, and I wear pants with no zippers, and I can't go back now.
You made that decision, and now you don't want to disappoint anyone.
I don't want to be a hypocrite.
You just stick to it the whole way through, no matter how much pain, suffering, or Or maybe you realize this isn't for me. Just ride that through.
Yeah. And it's that kind of, so it's imprisonment.
I think a general term that we use, maybe let's say in psychology or in everyday language, is stubbornness. Right? And I have a great story for that. Let me just tell you about my great-grandfather. My dad told me the story. So my great-grandfather had farms in Cuba. One of the farms was on the beach, and he was there walking with his friends. And he says, look over there. And he points into the beyond, and he says, look at that group of goats. And then his friends say, wait a minute, over there? And he says, yeah. And then 2 seconds later, they fly away. And he says, I think his name was Jesus. Didn't you see? They flew away. They can't be goats. They're pelicans. And he goes, they might have flown away, but they were goats. I was like, my goodness, that's suffocating. Yeah, you're not losing a single. You're just not moving from your point. You will die at that place, no matter what.
Yeah.
I guess I might have inherited a little bit of that.
It's a funny story, but it's a funny story on a first spelling, and if you give it an iota of thought, it's a sad story. Right? Mm-hmm. For someone to be so rigid. I mean, one of the signs, external signs of death is rigor mortis.
Right. The body is just
stiff and rigid and stubborn, right?
And even before that, right? A person who doesn't do any exercise or who has a lot of muscle cramps or arthritis, it's right. Still, the muscles are tight, they can't move, right?
Yeah, stubborn. Muscles are stubborn.
Muscles are stubborn.
Yeah. It's what I've experienced within the study of Zen, because as we all are, I think, for the most part, at the beginning of our journey, intellectually ravenous. I mean, I've read, I think, anything and everything that used to be in that place, that museum place called the library. Remember those places? Where they keep...
still exist. They're rare kinds, but yes, bookstores too.
Where they keep these things called books that you have to go and go through a catalog and then go to the Dewey, go to
you can't do decimal system,
right? And I think as we all frequently are, when interests are piqued, we become ravenous on the topic, and this is what my experience was, and I've consumed incessantly. Whatever things of topic, of interest, philosophy, various religions, Zen, the scriptures, this, that, and the whole spectrum of it, from very dogmatic to very transcendental and mystical to bordering on insanity, as many of the philosophers and those who've gone down the rabbit hole and haven't been seen again. And the experience eventually became that we must understand what words really are and how to see them in a sober sort of wisdom way. That is to say that they are provisional. And when consumed, the words create a world of their own, and we, as MyongAhn Sunim would say, you drown in the book. You become so fixated on the words and how they're said, and so precisely, that those things become so much more of the reality than the reality to which the words point to. The map is not the territory, but one could be so deluded that one begins to think that as the words describe it, so it is.
Right. So in other words, maybe by regurgitating something that you read in the book, you actually feel like you directly understand the point.
Direct experience, right.
So at that point, you were no different than a parrot.
We are all parrots.
Yeah. I remember one of the first teachings that MyongAhn Sunim is our Zen teacher, gave to us was, "Bring me all the books.
Bring me all the books.
Bring me all the books."
And he was so kind of cute about it because like, oh, well, you know, in his limited language, in his limited English language, right? Oh, what kind of books are you reading? Oh, I'm interested. What do you have? You know, and so because it, you know, clearly if he said, "Give me all the books," we're all like, oh, you know, some contraband books might have been stashed and quote unquote accidentally forgotten, but we so proudly, you know, presented, and I brought my entire library of information, and it was like, oh yeah, leave it over there in the corner of the meditation room, you know, and didn't think of it until I had forgotten about those books, and then having forgotten about them, and then had a sort of aha moment at one point in time. It's like, wait a second, I had a library of books that I left here that is now missing, right? And this was a kind of a covert operation on his side of it to free me.
Because I don't think at that time you had the and.
At the time I had nothing. At the time I had the words.
The words were
as they were, right? And you know, it's interesting. There's a tea. I not that long ago I had someone come for the tea with the rabbit, and I served them omija. Omija is and I don't recall what the English name of it's a red berry, and it's dehydrated, and when you make tea of it, it rehydrates it, obviously. But omija is 5-flavor tea, and when you initially brew it, as the temperature of it changes, the flavor changes. The flavor profile shifts, right? So it's simultaneously a little bit sweet, a little bit salty, a little bit bitter, a little bitter, a little tangy. You know, there's a little umami thing in it. You know, so it's got this whole experience depending on the temperature of the water, depending on how long you steep, etc., etc. And words too have that similar quality, that they could change flavor, right? And they could change flavor depending on what other words they're juxtaposed against. How do you construct your statement, right? And you put a word in the wrong place, that is, you know, and they will then weaponize it, they will insult, they will whatever. So the construct of it makes a difference.
But also with reading and consuming words, as you change and you evolve and your eye opens, because now it's very interesting, because now you can consume books. Back then, the teaching was, and again, this is so Zen, right? As you evolve, the same no becomes a okay or a yes, right? Because your eyes of wisdom is open. Now, you're not just consuming those words as a prison, like maybe it was back then, that would obstruct your development. I was just thinking, like, as a metaphor, like early on you're very excited about something, right? So you just consume recklessly, like someone, let's say, reads mushrooms are good for you, and so you're an amateur, you got into the forest and you just consume all the mushrooms.
All the mushrooms.
You will end up dead or tripping.
That'll be the last mushroom you've been on. Yeah.
Right? But then, you know, you go into a course, you study with someone who's an herbalist, now you know how to discern. You know, I have this is what I can use. When, why,
right.
That
the nuance.
The nuance. Early on in someone's journey, they don't have that nuance.
You know, I almost sort of leaning towards saying that in the youth of our spiritual growth, I was consumed by books. Even though I said I've consumed, you know, everything that they've consumed me, right? And I have lost myself to them. And you know, in reading of certain things, and we like to say that, you know, I've lost myself in the book. I've been transported to another world and experience and kind of travel, that romanticized kind of thing, which is nice. Yeah, allow oneself to kind of take flight of imagination. Yet, one must be cautious so that it doesn't become such a reality that everything becomes in that same vein, that
Right.
what I have read must be like, okay, Omija tea is sweet.
Yes.
When?
Right.
And if you
How
haven't
sweet.
had, like, how sweet, and
If the tongue hasn't tasted it.
yeah, and so that flavor profile of words shifts and changes depending on various aspects. And then, of course, we use the words, even though Mr. Webster had suggested that the meaning of the word is this. But we use it according to our own dictionary, what the word means to me.
Oh.
And then the other person doesn't know what the word means to me. And so then they hear it on account of what that word means to them.
Oh boy, let me tell you a story related to that. And you were there for that. So when I was in Rutgers, I made friends with some girl. Her name was Ingrid, and she was telling me how she had a baby. She lived on Bush campus, and she asked me one day after class, "Hey, can you help me move the crib?" I was like, "Sure." I felt so bad, right?
Right. Yes.
You know, she's living by herself. She has a baby. You know, she can't pick up the crib. I was like, so I called up my friend MyongAhn, and I was like, "Hey, this is gonna be fast. You know,
we're just moving the crib.
We're just gonna move the crib from one room to the next." And let me tell you, talking about what the word means to them versus what the word means to me, there was a huge gap, wider than the Grand Canyon there. Because when we got there, to our surprise, what was it?
The crib.
The crib, the actual crib.
And those are not of the era.
Yes.
The crib is a house.
Yeah,
The
whole house.
So
our 5-minute journey turned into like 4 hours.
we thought it was going to be a crib, but it was the crib.
That crib, right.
So move the whole house as
Yeah.
opposed to one piece of furniture for the child, which, you make an assumption of being small. Yeah. It's that. It absolutely is. We hear the words according to our inner dictionary. And it's filtered also.
Yeah. To match.
And in couples therapy, that's what comes up. That's not what I meant. Well, you said you hated me. But that's not what I meant. I don't mean like I hated you. I hated the moment. I didn't hate you.
One particular thing.
Right.
But
then
the reason is like you hate me completely. So many times I'll be like, all right, I'm done with you then.
Yeah.
And then after some processing, it was that one specific moment when you did this one specific thing.
Yeah. It's
that happens all the
it's
time.
amorphous. The words, how they are conceived of in the mind, how they are birthed into the world, and who's doing the child rearing. They're completely different realms, and is a helpful thing, because and includes all those three. It includes how the word is conceived inside my mind. It includes the meaning that I intend for the word to mean, and it includes the potential for the other person to understand it differently, completely differently.
Right. And there's a door for freedom too, if you need to use the eject button.
Right. The end allows it. Yeah.
The end allows that.
There's a word, and I can't conjure it up now, but it's one of those magical words that has
Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious?
Not that
I'm
one.
dating myself with these things.
There's a word that has two meanings, but in a very unique fashion, they're very opposite meanings. And I can't, for the life of me, conjure.
Well, the English language has a bunch of those.
Right.
And
And
homonyms and things like that. Words that here and here.
Right.
How you spell it, bear and bear.
Yeah.
One letter changes the whole meaning. And sometimes it's even spelled the same and the meaning is different. And that's where you have to look at the context.
Cleave.
Cleave, okay.
right? Cleave as in to split apart and separate, and cleave as in to attach and hold on to. I cleave to this, right? And so if you just throw it out there, cleave. Just on the nature of it,
hey, can you cleave this?
What do you mean?
Like,
do you want me to split it off, or do you want me to glue it?
Do you see how this can create a complete, like if a parent tells a kid or an employer tells an employee, hey, can you cleave that?
Right.
And then you come back, and you want it to be sewn together, and they cut it.
They're separated.
That can just create a disaster.
That's right. Words are provisional. They are to point to a reality, and they are to communicate, and they have this dual. As so much in this world does. This is not any news, really. I think to a thought out mind. We live in a world of duality. Coin has two sides. Well, technically, some people nitpicky will say it has three sides.
Right.
I forget what the edge is, but there's a name for it too. Right.
But they understand the point.
Right. And this idea of that words are nothing because they don't actually hurt. The word pain and fire don't burn, and wet doesn't moisten anything. And yet, at the same time, the words can cripple a person, destroy and obliterate and scar for life. And understanding and spreading the mind to encompass that complete reality of the duality as not ensconced in one side and the other, not mired here and there, not kind of divided between here and there, but as a end. Yeah. I'm going to make a big statement. It's the word for peace. And my view and your view, my position and your position. Not this blackmail thing, or not this terrorist sort of thing, mine or yours. Right. Open your hearts to the possibility of end. Put end in between words. Make it inclusive. Make it less divisive. Unite. Cleave. What one? Cleave.
Yeah. I think be patient enough to see past your perspective and your point of view. Right? Whatever topic you're talking about, I oftentimes tell people, well, if we're talking about an elephant, you have to really try to think, are you standing on the mountaintop or are you in the valley? And where's the elephant? Because where you stand and where the elephant is completely changes the perspective, right? At the mountaintop, it's the size of your thumb. In the valley,
patience. I think that sounds like a good topic for the next podcast.
Patience.
What is it?
Many people say it's good, but then they tell me afterwards, but I don't have any of it.
Right. What is it? Patience. How about that? Next time.
Yeah. All right.
Patience. Here on The World Through Zen Eyes. Until then.
Take care
of yourselves and each other.